Welcome to School Facilities and Operations Podcast. I'm the host, Burke Jones, and I'm a director of operations. So that's what we talk about here is facilities and school operations every week. We have a couple formats of shows. On some episodes, we bring on vendors and we really ask them to share their expertise with us. And really, I try to pull out some golden nuggets that we can all learn from. Then the other show is we bring on another facilities operations guy from a K-12 school around the nation, and we just have a conversation about what we're working on and what's exciting right now. And so today, I'd like to welcome David Pettit to the show. He is the director of facilities at Joplin Schools. So welcome, David.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to chatting today.
Oh, so am I. So tell us a little bit about kind of your work history and then something that we about you that we can't read about on LinkedIn.
Okay. Well, I've been with Joplin Schools for 29 and a half years. I began my process here as a journeyman carpenter, and I've been journeyman carpenter, lead carpenter, supervisor, craftsman, assistant director of buildings, grounds, and transportation, director of transportation, and now director of facilities. So I've worn several different hats in the district. It's given me a great opportunity to have different viewpoints and kind of understand how the process all works together. And so being a part of that for that long, we teasingly say I'm the guy who knows where the dead bodies are buried. And so I try to be a resource for everybody in the district so that we can take care of our students and make sure and we give them the top quality education that they deserve. As far as something unusual about me, one of the things I usually point out, I have several different hobbies. I love to fly fish, tie my own flies, play fantasy football, coin collecting. But one of the little more unusual that people find is that I also play bass in a bluegrass band.
Fantastic. We have a big bluegrass festival over here in Kansas. Have you ever been to that?
I have not been to that, but love going when I can and catching what I can and playing with my buds.
Nice. Well, I know we were talking a little bit before, but right now you guys are preparing a new school and
Mhm.
getting ready for the kids when they return from winter break to begin occupying that. So tell us a little bit about your bond and um, what you have going on there.
We passed the bond about 2.5 years ago, and we had two particular projects that we wanted to accomplish. One was an addition to one of our elementary schools, a little over 8,000 square foot addition. But the main part of the bond was we had two um, aging facilities. We have a 1927 elementary building and a 1928 building that we were going to combine those two together in a new school. And so we began the process of trying to find property. We were able to work with the city of Joplin, a park area that they were trying to begin to lessen the amount of footprint that they were taking care of. So we were able to procure some former park property, 17 acres, that we were then able to sits on top of a hill, Dover Hill, actually happens to be the name of the facility, and building a new 70,000 square foot elementary school building there for our kids. We've been finishing up that process. A couple of weeks ago, we took a Saturday and I had 75 of my staff members that helped at the two old locations, loaded trucks, and then had a crew of about 36 people at the other location receive all that stuff that had been packed up. And so we unloaded and left them enough to finish out school last week. And so now we're trying to kick the contractors out as we move our teachers in and get that transition done so that on January the 4th, we're going to have kids in seats in that new building.
That's fantastic. That's what I did last year at this time. We did the same thing, and it sure was fun to be there on the first day. And the kids were walking in, and it's like this feels like a hotel. It's so
Uh-huh.
fancy.
Uh-huh.
It's a
Really
lot.
looking forward. Like I said, with those kids moving out of almost 100-year-old buildings, just this year. Size of classrooms, I think, is what's going. Well, it floored the teachers when because they were moving from about 675 to 700 square feet, going to 900 in most of the classrooms, and in our kindergarten classrooms, we're at 1,100 square feet.
Right. That's about exactly what we build also.
Mhm.
So, how big was the bond issue in total dollars?
The total bond issue is going to be about 26 million, a little over $26 million, a little under $24 million for the building that we're building new, and then the addition was almost 3 million.
Okay. Yeah, with prices going up, because we did a brand new elementary school that opened in 2020, and I think it was about 16 million.
Mhm.
So, so is that a three-section school, like three grades of
Yeah,
every class?
three sections of each grade, K through 5.
Okay. So did you guys hard bid that or do CMAR?
We actually did CMAR. State of Missouri, CMAR became a valid approach to building. It's been roughly about 5 years now, and so this has actually been our first large scale project that we've been able to take advantage of the CMAR process. We've been satisfied with that. It's a little different, but we've pulled together a great architect and construction company, that three-legged stool that they talk about, that CMAR settles out, that it's been a really good partnership for us.
So did you guys select your architect and then the contractor, or did they um, propose as a team?
We actually selected our architect first, and then about 2 months after that, the architect then worked with us through the selection process for the contractor.
Okay. So, I mean, I've had a really good experience with CMAR, and I've worked on both sides of it, like as an architect and then as the operations building owner side. Um, I think it's great because with the team working together, you can control a lot of costs up front, and
Mhm.
you pretty much know you're going to be there by the time you bid it.
Right,
So, with a
right.
lot more certainty. Is that
Yeah,
what you
having
guys?
a yeah, well, with working with a contractor, they give us a gross maximum price. And so you know that you're going to come in at that price or less, depending on, of course, change orders that are all honestly going to come. I don't care how good you are, you're going to have some change orders. And we try to minimize those as much as possible. But yeah, knowing that price coming in and doing everything that you can to make sure that of course, the big thing is you want to come in under budget and on time or beat your timeline. And fortunately, with our elementary, we're going to do both those things.
I mean, that's fantastic, especially with the inflation right now and the long lead times. Did you guys spend a lot of time planning those deliveries and the upfront schedule?
We did. We worked hard that as soon as bid day occurred and once we'd chosen, and then they bid the different packages, that as soon as those packages were awarded, that our construction company, along with us and the architect, instructed those subcontractors, get those things ordered, get them coming. We will find a place to store them. We'll work whatever magic we have to work, but get that coming, because that way we could ensure the most current pricing before price increases would take effect. And because of the wait times on a lot of those things, that stuff was sitting there ready for us to use, rather than the other way around. Our biggest challenge, actually, that affected the timeline somewhat, was bar joist. Those were the most difficult thing for us to get ordered and get here. And so our contractor worked probably out of typical order a little bit, the way they would normally do a construction project, to do everything that they could. And then our bar joist came in about 2.5, 3 weeks earlier than we planned. And so we had all of that in place. So as soon as they came in, they just picked up and kept going, and we didn't hiccup at all and kept our timeline intact.
Yeah. Was there any lead times that really surprised you?
Um, it's funny, odd things that you wouldn't think about. A switch gear was one of the things that we had to wait on probably longer than anything else. We kept teasingly telling the electrical company that we thought they were doing it to us on purpose, because it just kept, they would get a promised anticipated delivery date, and then the next meeting we would have, that would get changed. And so it just kept being this leapfrog thing of when it was coming. And so that was one thing that I found that I wouldn't have anticipated as early as we ordered it, that would throw us behind on a timeline. And so that made it a little more difficult to get the building up and permanent power after we came up with construction, because we're waiting on that switchgear.
Yeah, I've heard that the switchgear is really far out. So
Mhm.
during the design process, did you guys have like incremental budget approvals that you took to the board, like at schematic design, design development, or did you just bring the final GMP?
No, we did incremental, and then as we honed in, we did a lot of work with our staff, the staff at those two buildings in the design. And as we started with a number, and then as we honed in on the design, then our budget was able to adjust from there. And so when it came down to it, and then they opened all of the different packages, then we had a really good idea of where we were going to be, and we came in just at or just a little under what the anticipated was at that point in time.
Okay. Yeah, that's how we've run it as well. So the way we set ours up is the contractor had what they called construction contingency built into the GMP.
Mhm.
And then we had a owner contingency, on top of that. Is that how you guys did it as well?
We worked it the same way. We began with the initial change orders, that we made adjustments to the contract. Then we decided that it made more sense for us to take the owner contingency, since it was already built in to the project. So then we started taking off of the owner contingency, so there was no change in the full amount of the gross maximum price that we have with the contractor. And that was the best move that we made. And we used probably less than half of the construction contingency that we had set aside, and very little of the owner contingency, which was on our side as well. And that's one of the ways, between that and the savings we did on the furniture allotment, was how we were able to keep our price down. And we're going to, as soon as we get final numbers, we're going to shout it from the rooftops that we came in under budget, and make sure that our patrons understand that even during tough, difficult economic times, you can make smart decisions, and even with challenges, you can move along. And as long as you do a good job overseeing your project, that you can still come under budget, and still get the project that you want.
Yeah. I don't think most people realize the amount of work that goes into that part of it.
Exactly. It's a lot of meetings, a lot of discussions, both formal and informal. And with my background, it helps me in having some understanding of how the construction happens and goes together. And so those conversations were pretty easy. And like I said, because we had a great partnership with both our architect and our CMAR, that it just made it a pretty seamless and pretty painless process.
Yeah. One of the things I think's interesting, it's not good or bad. I'm not saying that. It's just an interesting thing that when the CMAR contractor provides the guaranteed maximum price, they have that contingency on their side of the line built in that they can kind of spend without authorization, at least when we did it, how we worked
Mhm.
it.
Mhm.
Um, so in the end, most of our change orders on the owner side were just things we wanted to do. Like, you
Hmm.
know what? I think we really want carpet in that room instead of tile. Just as you go through, there's some things that you notice that you want to tweak or whatever. So, and our contractor did a fantastic job. I mean, they came in under the GMP in almost every project, but we
Right.
used some of that money for things to make the building better or things we had cut earlier in the project that then we could just say, hey, we've got the money now. Let's enhance this area a little bit more or whatever. But I think that contingency that's on their side of the line, um, it's interesting. And I've talked to contractors about it, and they see it a lot different, and I see it their way too. Like this is our insurance buffer basically that
Hmm.
we can make sure we bring it under the GMP. Did you find kind of the same thing?
Well, we were fortunate enough that we worked it to where any construction contingency money that was on their side of the ledger, so to speak, is that we worked that out because all of our change orders by policy have to go to approval to the school board. So no matter how much or how little, those all have to be approved by the Board of Education here in Joplin. And so we went through the whole change order process with each one of those. And I think if final with what we're going to end up about 32 change orders on that $24 million project, which is probably under what typical average would be for that size of project. But all of those were taken to the school board for their approval, so that even though the money was coming out of construction contingency, it was approved by the district via the Board of Education for the contractor to proceed with the expenditures of that money.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. That way it's all above board and everybody sees what's happening.
Right. Well, in that way, anything outside your scope of original design changes, which were either due to choices that were made or to unforeseen things like $1 million worth of rock removal. Those kind of challenges that we were able to meet and take care of, but everybody knew about it. It wasn't hidden. It was to the public. It was to the school board, and so everybody knew. No matter how great or how ugly it was, everybody was a part of that decision making process.
Yeah, that's pretty smart. So one of the things the gentleman that had this position before me, he for the owner side of contingency, whatever it was, 5%, 3% of the total construction cost, he had the board approve that amount of contingency, and then we didn't have to take every change order back to the board.
Mhm.
They're like, as long as you bring it in at this number or less, we're good. But you don't, and that saves some time too, because some of these change orders, like we didn't have time to wait for another board meeting to get approval. Um, so
Yeah,
that's how we did. I thought it worked pretty well.
yeah. Yeah, there's always unique challenges with that timeline and trying not to affect it with the decision-making process that you have in place. So
Right.
you have to set that up and think about that ahead of time so that it doesn't throw you behind.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's change gears a little bit because I really want to talk to you guys about how you've handled like some indoor air quality issues that we've all read about, lived through, whatever in the last few years. Um, so I guess tell me like how did you guys start studying it? How did it kind of bubble to the surface? I'm assuming it was
Mhm.
COVID, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, and then what kind of how did you move forward with it?
Well, we had actually begun the process of looking at indoor air quality actually prior to COVID. It was always important to us anyway, but because of COVID, it immediately shot up and went to the top of importance. But we had already begun the process. One of the first things that we did was filtration and looking at filters within our systems. And we've got 1.8 million square feet that we have building wise here in Joplin Schools. And so we wanted to make the best decision that we could for filtration without affecting our equipment. And so one of the first things that we did was start looking at what we could do, and we found a filter system that worked well and that we had a lot of confidence in. It actually ended up being a MERV 9 filter that we could install across the board without affecting any of our equipment, with having to change sizing of motors or air intake. And so we found that opportunity, and then the opportunity that came with that was the fact that the MERV 9 filters that we chose, we were able to greatly reduce the amount of filter changes. Matter of fact, we're sitting to where most of our filters now, we're getting 10 to 12 months between
Wow.
filter changes. And we are cycling through that and finding that, except in a few rare occasions, we're able to do one filter change a year and still maintain all of the quality that we need. So that saved cost on the filters, but then also on the labor of changing those out. So that was one of the early things that we took on just prior to COVID outbreak, so to speak. But then the other thing that we had begun, we are, I'm not touting Train, but we're about a 95% Train district. And so working with them and we were working on efficiencies, because we had the big part of that was Joplin High School, which is 500,000 square feet in and of itself. So monster of a building, but we had a building that wasn't performing as we had anticipated. It was built after the 2011 tornado here in Joplin and opened in 2014. And so about 2019, we were taking a look at a 6-year-old building, wasn't running as efficiently as we wanted. And so that had to do, affected air quality. So we partnered with Train to do a study to figure out what we had going on. And what we found was that one of the killer things that we found was exemptions that had been entered into the schedule and set points. We had over 3,000 exceptions in the building for our HVAC guys trying to do what they could to make sure that we were getting comfort and those kind of things. But we had over 3,000 exceptions in that scheduling, which just devastates anything that you want to do as far as making sure that we have parameters that we can control. So
Right.
one of the things that we did was have to go back, and they had to clear all that out, and we essentially recommissioned the entire system there. And so we brought that back online, and we're able to get that back in line. The first year that we brought that back online, we saw savings of about $50,000 for the year. And I think we spent $28,000 to get to that point. So we
Wow.
received payback in less than 12 months, which is phenomenal. And we've been able to continue that. So now my largest building in the district is the cheapest square foot price in the district. So through all that, we're running efficiently. Well, we took the knowledge that we had of that, then as we were beginning to look at indoor air quality, and then as we came into COVID and like I said, just shot to the top, the importance of that, we were looking at what we could do that helps indoor air quality if we efficiency up all of the buildings that we have running. And then by doing so, you do two things. You increase your indoor air quality, and you can see some cost savings, or at least cost control. And so that's what we began. Again, Joplin High School, we had CO2 levels that were up over 2,000, which above 1,200 is around where, 1,200 is where you want to hit. And those CO2 problems, the challenges that we had there were a lot due to outside air that wasn't making it into the building,
Right.
which in effect then affects the outcome of students and their testing capabilities. So we were hampering the students by not running efficiently as well. And so when we looked at indoor air quality, we want to get that CO2 down. We don't want we want to reduce VOCs. And we decided, Joplin School District, that the best way to do that was to make sure that what we have in place is running properly and efficiently so that we're bringing in enough outside air. We're monitoring CO2. Temperature is a big deal, but we also want to make sure that people are comfortable. So we began a second process with Train to install new sensors and thermostats across our district so that we're able to check temperature, humidity, and CO2 sensors within each of those thermostat spaces so that we can look at that. And as they help us run data analytics on that, we start honing in on where those problem areas are and grabbing that low hanging fruit of getting that fixed, whether it's an outside air damper that's stuck open, you know. So now you're getting all this fresh air in and you're having to heat it, especially with the weather coming up. Or is it shut? And that's where our CO2 numbers were just going out the roof. And so by putting all that together, we've helped our indoor air quality by enhancing and making sure that our systems are running like they're supposed to. And so we've begun that process. We're in step 2 of going through that. And as soon as we are completed with step 2 and we have all of the data that we can analyze as far as the challenges that we've got, then we'll be able to move forward with, do we need to change equipment? Do we need to upsize equipment? Are we running the way we need to? Is the equipment there proper for what we got? And from there, once we get to that point, then those areas that are still a challenge, then we can look at additional things such as UV and those other items that would allow us to treat air on top of what we're doing with running the building efficiently.
Okay, so a lot to unpack there, but
A
I've been
lot.
reading some articles about recommissioning buildings and
Hmm.
kind of going back to the original design. And because I know, guys go up and they, close an outside air damper, just make so that it provides better conditioning for the space or whatever.
Exactly.
And then it just never gets changed again. And so we
Hmm.
have we have exceptions just like you had. I don't think we have that amount. I get a report,
I hope not.
but but I think it just evolves over time.
Hmm.
um, And the HVAC techs are trying to make that teacher happy.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's warm in there, so we're going to do this. And then over time, things just get all out of whack. So how
Mhm.
did you fund this whole thing?
Well, we did the data analytics. They call Train their proprietary name is Intelligent Services. And so we were able to join with them where they come in and they help us read all that. And they have in Kansas City, Missouri, have a war room, for lack of a better term, that all of our data came together and then they help us analyze. And they met with us once a quarter to go over that report. And it helps identify those things that are those the dampers closed so we're not getting the flow of air, or the dampers open, or an outside air sensor, temperature sensor, was failing, and so it was giving false readings. But they have a data analytics that runs that whole thing, and then by bringing those reports back, that lets my technicians know where they need to go. And some of those things that they would find with those data analytics are things that my guys, even going and looking at the particular unit in person, wouldn't necessarily see. And so
Okay.
by running that data and then having that, and I mean, you're talking the data analytics is that thick, and we would look at that every quarter, but we're able to flag those things that were necessary that we needed to jump on. And so my guys weren't hunting that needle in the haystack. They were more directed on where they could go. And you talked about exceptions. One of the things that we learned through all that about exceptions are not a bad thing, but we try not to make those permanent exceptions. We try to give them a window where we're going to try to take care of the issue to get comfort level for a while, but then we've got to jump in and find out where the issue is so that we can repair that.
Right. Right. So is this a capital outlay expenditure, or did you?
It was a capital outlay expenditure. We began the main part of that process with last year's capital outlay and a fairly substantial amount of money that we put toward that initially, so that we can begin to, one, get all of those data points and those new thermostats put in so that we can get that data. And now we're beginning to collect the data, and we'll take a look at that. So it will help guide us toward where we need to go to next. And we'll put more capital outlay. We'll take those budgets to our Board of Education, I believe, next month, get that approved. And then so for the summer, as we begin, we'll know where we're headed to and those things that we need to address with the next step.
Did you guys look at dust level or anything like that in the indoor air quality studies?
We haven't looked at dust. I felt like we took care of a lot of that because of the filtration that we put in, and we did do some testing during the filtration system to try to make sure that as we were loading up those filters with those dual media filters and checking to make sure the pressure on both sides, that we weren't losing, and plugging up and causing stress on our systems. But we felt like we were taking care of a lot of that with our filtration.
Okay. So did you already have all of your buildings on building control system, or did you still have some like on
Yeah,
off?
well, we had most every building, all of our school buildings. Some of our ancillary buildings were not yet on the system, but we had building automation systems. But some of those were fairly antiquated. Some of those were from the late 90s. And so we were still running that. So as part of the process of updating everything, we have brought everything up to the newest technology that we were able to train as far as their building automation systems, which in turn helps us get faster data, but more thorough data, coupled with the new thermostats that we're installing. And so that everything is up to date, running with the most amount of information that we can gather, so that as we look at the data, we're able to better ascertain those areas that we need to address.
I really like, I mean, it seems like you have a real system, and I'm sure it's maybe not as perfect as it all sounds, but
Sure.
you have a very, you took a deliberate approach towards it and teamed
Mhm.
with a partner and that you trusted and moved forward with. So,
Sure. Well, we found that, with ESSER funding that came through, we looked at that, and we were ready to make some initial decisions, and we said, let's hold on a second. We want to look at this not just as a COVID response, but we want to look at this as a district response for the long term, for what's best for our students and for our buildings. And so we took that step back and tried not to spend that ESSER money like it was burning a hole in our pocket, but to make sure that we were going to invest that money into the long term, not just like I said, a quick COVID response.
right. I think it also goes back to one of my friends, Joshua Peach. He does a podcast called Be Awesome at FM and
Hmm.
Show Me Mo, what facilities, I think it's called.
Uh-huh.
But his partner on the Be Awesome, he says, facilities guys are like the man behind the curtain. Like nobody really knows what we do, but it's like you're having a direct impact on the ability of students to learn by lowering those CO levels and providing better indoor air quality. And no one, that's not visible. For one thing, it's air, but for another thing, it's just not what people are used to thinking about or even have knowledge of.
Hmm.
Um, I'm always just fascinated by the direct impact that we have on kids. And honestly, it's one of the things that makes the job super fun.
Yeah. I tell my staff all the time, if those kids weren't here, we don't have a job. Yeah, they are the reason that we're here. And so that anything we can do to take care of their needs, make them successful both as humans and in the classroom, whether that's making sure we have a clean school, making sure that indoor air quality is taken care of, all that couples together to give them the best opportunities that we can afford them, to make them better than we are, so to speak. And so we want them to be successful. And so the little things that we can do and tweak and spend a little money on, if it makes their outcome for when they graduate from high school here, to make them successful in their community and whatever their desire is for their future. That's what we want to do, and really, that's the only reason we are here.
Yeah. Man, on that note, I mean, it really does all come down to the kids. I think it's a great kind of ending here, because I think you guys are doing some great things over there in Joplin, and we're gonna have to catch back up at some point. And um, when I get to that point of studying air quality, I will share some results and turn to you for some advice. So much appreciated. So now what we do to wrap up, I ask everybody the same three questions. It's kind of a rapid fire thing.
Okay.
So the first question is like, what would your parents or family describe what you do for what would your parents or family describe your job as?
Well, I have the distinct advantage, at least with my family and my wife and kids. My wife is a 36-year school teacher, so she has an understanding, for the most part, of what I do. Um, my daughter and my son are both school teachers. And
Okay.
so, I jokingly say that I wasn't smart enough to be a teacher, so I got into facilities. So, but they understand what I do for the most part. They understand and listen to those days when I come home and maybe not as happy as I want to be about how things are going. So, my wife and I spend a lot of good time in conversation, and she helps me understand the teaching and curriculum side, and I try to help her understand how the side comes from facilities. So it makes for a good partnership.
That's fantastic. But you can't go home and complain about teachers either. So
Well, if I do, it has to be in a roundabout way.
there you go. So do you use a digital or paper planner?
I am a digital guy. Google Calendar and I are pretty good friends. And it's the one thing, well, if I could only have two things in life, I would want Google Calendar and sticky notes.
Okay.
And if I have both those things, I can survive.
You can get things done. That sounds good. Um, so when do you get your best work done during the day? Like what time frame?
I would say mid morning. Mid morning is when my staff is not here to distract me quite as much. They're out in the buildings taking care of maintenance items or custodial work. One of the worst times, and it becomes a joke around here, as to what time I eat lunch, because no matter what time I eat lunch, I have one of my staff members who he must watch my office, and he always comes to see me during lunch. And that
Yeah.
could be anywhere from 11:30 to 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but it will never fail that he comes to see me when I'm eating lunch. So eating lunch is probably the worst time, but mid morning tends to be when I can get the most work done. Still, we've kind of gotten the day started, and concentration levels still high there. And a cup of hot tea and a granola bar, and I'm good to go.
Yep. Well, your lunch schedule sounds like a lot of facilities people.
Yeah, I know I'm not unique in that aspect.
Absolutely. Well, listen, David, I really appreciate you being on today. If anybody wants to reach out to you or ask you any questions, like is LinkedIn the best way to contact you, or do you have something else?
LinkedIn is fine, but I also would take emails, and it's pretty simple. Dave Pettit, Pettit, at joplinschools.org. And as I tell people, we compete as with other school districts on the football field, but when it comes to school districts, we're all trying to take care of kiddos. And so any knowledge, or how little that may be, that I can share and be a resource for, I'm more than happy to share with folks our experiences. And then if that makes life a little easier for them, I'm grateful to have that opportunity.
Well, thanks again for being on here. I know every episode I pull away, man, I want to add that up to my list of things to do. So We really appreciate you being on. And to all you listeners, if you're liking what we're doing here, leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, if that's where you listen, or wherever you listen to podcasts that you can leave a review. I'd really appreciate it. With that, David, thanks for spending time with me today, and we will talk to you later.
Thanks for having me. Wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.